How are you doing, Mary?
I'm doing well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on your show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to interview you because I know you have been very active trying to help parents homeschool.
Mhm.
Also you are involved in some legislature, some bills that right now is in our legislature. And so I kind of like to have your to hear from you and also share that with our audience. Um,
Sure.
so, well, let's start with the education side of it. When did you start to promote homeschool?
Well, I started, that's a great question. I
Uh-huh.
started actually homeschooling my own children when my daughter was going into third grade.
Oh, wow.
And so she's now a sophomore in college. So that was a fair
It's been a
bit of
while.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So,
so what
uh,
made you decided to homeschool your daughter?
well, we had been in a public school and we had a great experience there for her kindergarten. And then we moved and we were going to a private Christian school, but the level of education just wasn't there. And with the cost of tuition, and there was a lot of clickiness at this particular private school.
Oh,
So we just felt that we could do a better job at much less expense. I had never planned on being a homeschool mom, and I didn't have anything against it. I
right,
just
right.
didn't know much about it.
Uh-huh.
But we really did believe that this was going to be the best option for her and then
Right.
for her younger sister. So we took the plunge. We went to a small homeschool conference where we looked at the different curriculum that was out there. And of
Mm,
course, at that time, there wasn't even close to what parents can choose from today.
right,
But we took the plunge, and it really was the very best thing that I think that ever could have happened to them.
right.
We were able to offer an education that was geared specifically toward their interests. We were able to go at their pace.
Hmm.
So, say in math, for some reason, one of them really had a hard time learning positive and negative numbers. She
Hmm.
just couldn't get that.
Right,
So we just stopped and worked on that until she mastered it.
right.
And then we moved on and it worked out. She got fractions
Hmm.
super fast and we just whizzed through that section. So we were able to adjust the pace of her education to match what
Right,
her specific needs were.
right. Yeah.
Um, and really, someone had told me when I first started homeschooling that I should write down my goals for the homeschool. And I think that was the very best advice that anybody could have given me because
Okay.
it's very easy to compare your homeschool to other people's homeschooling experiences. And every child is different, every
Right,
child matures at a different pace. So to compare yourself to other people can be a really deadly trap.
right. Yeah.
Um, so for us, my goal was for them to love learning, and
Hmm.
it was for them to be equipped with the skills that they needed to become independent learners. And I would say that we accomplished that. My oldest is getting a degree in chemistry with a focus on applied research. I
Mm.
have another child who's going to major in science education. And then my youngest is probably going to be pursuing mechanical
Oh,
engineering,
wow.
which I laugh because I am a writer and I'm all humanities and history and government and art. And I didn't get any kids who were interested in any of those things, but that's okay.
Right, right. Well,
Yeah,
yeah, we'll never know, right?
right,
And also kids
right.
definitely are different, even though they grew up in the same family, yeah,
Yes,
with everything same, but they develop different interest.
right.
And they do have different talents.
Correct.
Mm,
Yes. And that was our goal. So we were able to, even as in their high school years, they went to a public school part time
mhm.
so they could participate in sports.
Right.
That opened up an opportunity to take AP classes. I was also able to schedule some job shadowing experiences for some of my kids who weren't quite sure where they wanted to go. So I was able to do that with the flexibility that we had with the time. It was a wonderful journey. We visited lots of colleges, helped them discover maybe what their interests were
Right.
and what
Right.
their best fit was. So it was fantastic. I highly recommend homeschooling high school. It was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah. Well, so since when you start to help um, other parents to homeschool?
Well, I started looking at that right around the time when COVID hit, and a lot of people were getting very concerned about having their children in the classroom. I was getting lots of questions from people. So I developed kind of an introductory seminar that people could attend. And the goal there was to help them understand really, I kind of looked back and said, what would I have wanted to know
Hmm.
before I started homeschooling and what
Right.
would have been helpful for me. So it's an interactive experience where parents are writing down their reasons why they're considering homeschooling. They really do a little bit of a dive into their own learning
Mhm.
and teaching styles and the learning styles of their children. So we cover that. We talk about curriculum options that will match
Right.
and help them find that balance, because what their friend might work and she raves about a curriculum might not work at all for
Right.
them.
Right.
So that's my goal. So I have a seminar that I do for that. And then I also meet with people individually to
Mm.
help them. And that's maybe my favorite time because then I get to sit down and meet with people one on one
Oh, that's
and help
great.
them
Yeah.
figure out where they want to go. And we can talk about co-ops, the benefits and the challenges of those, and any types of extracurricular activities. And if they tell me ahead of time, I can get them connected to, say, if it's drama or music or sports, and just let them know what's available. Homeschooling has just exploded.
Right.
And so there are so many opportunities for people to get their kids plugged into activities that just didn't exist before.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, especially because COVID, and a lot of parents saw that there was not much teaching going on, well, not much academics going on in their kids' schools, but they kind of afraid to like homeschool them. So, what do you say to people like that, parents that they don't think they are uh, equipped?
They are absolutely equipped. And there are so many ways to get involved in homeschooling. So when I first started, I wanted the comfort of a published curriculum where I didn't have to do a lot of planning. I was going to be
Hmm.
homeschooling two children and then I added in a third
Right.
later. And so we opted for a very sort of scripted, prepackaged plan. And
Hmm.
that worked really well for our first year. So I literally did very little prep. I just opened up the
Right.
folder. It said on this day, turn to this page in this book and do this activity. And I really appreciated that sort of safety net.
Hmm.
Other people might feel more confident to just launch into doing some schooling on their own. There's also a lot of virtual options and online options so that you can be in the room and guiding and coaching, but you're not really responsible
Right.
for developing an academic plan.
Right. Exactly.
So it really comes down to, I think, helping you determine what your comfort level is. And the other thing that I really want to focus on with parents who have had that maybe entry level experience is to begin to move away from a curriculum focused education and move toward an outcome or goal based program.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the reason I say that is because life happens, right?
Right.
And you're supposed to be on week 10, day 3, and you're back at week 7 because something happened in your family. And I think that women get, most of the people I work with are the moms. They get really stressed about that. I've fallen behind.
Right. Right.
And you haven't fallen behind. First of all, you have all year to get in your 180 days.
Right.
Um, But you have to stop and think, if I'm rushing my children to get through just so I can check off the box,
Mm,
that's not really education, and you're not taking full advantage of the opportunity that you have as a homeschooler.
right, right,
Or if everyone's getting stressed, it's the middle of the year, the interest has waned, you can take a break
right,
and you
exactly.
can go do a nature walk. You can
Yep,
go do a field trip. Your goal is to keep their hunger for knowledge fresh,
right,
and just plugging through a curriculum is, if it's difficult for you and frustrating for you, it's going to be
right,
frustrating for your
exactly,
children.
exactly.
So you can kind of test that sort of gauge of everybody's emotions and
Mhm,
ability and interest. That's not to say that you just neglect the curriculum altogether,
right.
mm, but you have so many opportunities to just impart your love of the world.
Mhm,
And for Christians, I just highly recommend it, because you can talk about faith
right,
in every aspect of every subject and
mhm,
help them understand God's design.
exactly,
So
yeah,
it's, you can build in Bible memory, you can talk about missionaries. There's so many things that you can do to help impart your faith
right.
to your children, that they're just never going to get in a public
Not
school.
in public school, yeah. One thing I like to say is that homeschooling is not schooling at home. So we are not
Right.
going to bring the school back to our home. That's totally, that's the wrong way of doing it. Just like
Right.
you said earlier, every child is different and their mental development is also different. And everyone will have some bad day or some good days. And the advantage of homeschooling is that we can accommodate for that. We
Yes.
can adapt to that. And also the 180-day requirements are actually pretty easy to meet.
Oh, very.
Yeah, because you can just go have family vacation and they can have an hour or two learning something. I mean, even to take a walk, right? Just
Right.
hike and just see what's going on there, identify different plants and trees. I mean, that counts as education.
It absolutely does. And that goes back to the goal-based
Mhm.
education as compared to the curriculum-based
Right,
education. If your goal is to help them become aware of the wonders of the world, and you walk through a trail and you stop at a creek and listen to the water and see the little bugs on top of the water and
right,
talk about them and journal about that, that's going to inspire a whole lot more love of learning. And when you go back into the classroom, you can identify the leaves and the bark and talk about those things, but they've experienced it for themselves,
right.
which is so much more powerful than just reading it in a
Yeah,
textbook.
exactly. I think this is what I see a lot of public school students. They lack the real life experience.
Yes.
Everything, all knowledge is just book knowledge. They never been able to apply it or to do something with it.
When my kids were little, so I set up these little learning stations for them. So, science can be as simple as, for the early elementary years, I had these little totes and I had a little chart and I said, "Does it float?" And my daughter, I just had all kinds of different objects and she could just play in the water.
Right,
But by playing, she was learning about different things that float, and we could talk about that. And does it stick? So we had magnets and we did things with magnets, and it was very hands on. And I do think that's why they're interested in science now,
right.
because their science education wasn't boring.
Yeah, it was fun and yeah,
Right.
and I think you actually uh, talked about is like the love of learning is to
Mhm.
you know help your children to develop that. And that is what I saw in public school and also in private school, that uh, a lot of kids, a lot of students, once they're done, they just hate it.
Right.
And they don't want to do anything with it. I mean,
Right. Whereas take
sad.
my daughter, who had those early learning experiences that were very hands on. And the other day she said, if I could just do math and engineering all day long, I would be so happy. So she found her passion and she wants to pursue that, and she has the confidence
Right.
to do that.
Very good.
And the nice thing about homeschooling, I want to add one more thing, is that you can adjust the pace of your day. So I know a lot of schools have taken out things like recess, and that's terrible.
Terrible. Yeah.
Children's brains need a break,
Right.
and their bodies need to move. They were
Right.
designed to move. So we sometimes would do math in a tree.
Yeah. Yep.
They would climb a tree and they could read their book or do their math homework outside in our yard,
Right.
or on the swing set. They could swing and then do a problem and then swing and then do a problem. So my kids were very active. And I think, especially for parents who maybe have kids who may have had a diagnosis of ADHD or other types of things, or they're just high energy kids,
Right. Right. Right.
homeschooling is the very best thing you can do for them, because you can let them move,
Right.
get that energy out in a healthy way. They're not going to get in trouble for not sitting in their seat.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, so I do think, and then one of my kids was always getting in trouble for reading in school, because they would have on the board a list of things that you could do if you finished your assignment, and reading quietly at your desk was one of them. Well, she is the type of reader that she just immerses herself in the book, and
Right.
everything else sort of disappears.
Yep.
So she wouldn't hear the teacher say,
Right.
you know,
Right. Right.
"Put
Yeah.
away your math books and get out your science books," and she would be getting in trouble for reading.
Right. 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 Yeah. Well, this is the thing. The school, the schedule. I mean,
Mhm.
you move from one subject to the next subject, and that is not natural.
Right.
That is more the result of you know industry revolution, the mass manufacturing, that kind of model. But as a people, especially as a child, we don't want to be restricted by the schedule. Sometimes, like I would get interested in math. I spend the whole day on math, and
Mhm.
someday I just like to read a novel. I just read a novel for that day, and that is very natural to us.
Exactly. And that's the other thing. One time we were studying the Middle Ages, and my kids had an assignment to create a castle out of recycled materials.
Ah,
And they just went crazy with that
right,
and developed all of these ideas and glued and spent several days sort of camped out on these medieval castles.
right,
But they learned so much about them in the process of that activity. And I didn't stop it and say, okay, you know, we have to submit these to this showcase, and whoever's not done, that's too bad. And we're moving on to this topic next. We could explore that until they'd had their fill.
right, right. Yeah, and I think well, later on, definitely we have to learn how to manage our time. But
Mhm.
I think that is more when we get into high school and
Mhm.
college. But early on, we shouldn't do that.
Right. We give them time to explore. And I know that there are families with multiple children, and they have to follow a certain schedule. And I think, you have the right to do that and design your program to whatever works for your family's rhythm. But I always recommend that you plan in time for play, you plan in time for quiet
Right.
reading,
Yeah.
you plan in time for running outside and getting some of that energy out. We would design snacks so the kids could have their snacks while they were doing their school, and they would each take a turn developing the snack for the family. So
Oh,
then they're learning about nutrition, they're
right,
learning
right,
about
right.
portion size, about how to serve other people. There's so many things about life that you can incorporate into your homeschool that they're not going to get
No, they are not. Yeah,
their 5 to 8 hours at
right,
an
right.
institution.
Yeah. Well, and especially now, it become a lot of public schools. Like, I mean, nobody like to be there, right?
Right.
The student, they don't like to be there. Teachers don't like to be there.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, this is what happened in Chicago, right? Those teachers didn't want to teach.
Right.
I mean, nobody likes to be in the school, and that's how the kids spend days. I mean, no wonder the kids just, you know, get bored and get, you know, I mean, when you get bored, your brain won't work. You're not
Mhm.
really learning. Yeah.
I want to say one more thing about homeschooling that kind of brought that to mind, your comment. We never really did a lot of testing.
Mm,
In Indiana, we have some of the best homeschool laws,
right.
so that we don't have to have our kids taking a lot of standardized tests.
Right.
And that was wonderful for us. It was very freeing. We all get to the same point eventually.
Right.
There's not this pressure to all be at the same place at the same time. And the kids who are developing later
Right.
really get hurt by that system. They get
Right.
put
Right. Right.
in hold as late learners, and they're put into a different, kids are sort of segregated by their learning abilities. And homeschooling takes that away. So my kids really didn't do a lot of testing. And my oldest daughter, her very first standardized fill in the bubble kind of test was the PSAT
Right.
when she was in high school, and
Mhm,
she did very, 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 very well.
mhm.
So I think that that's an anecdotal piece of evidence that teaching to a test is the worst way to
Oh, it
teach.
is. It is worse the way. And we are not supposed to do that anyway. I mean, the test, I mean, ISTEP, for example, not I learned, those kind of tests is supposed to be a kind of snapshot uh, about what the kids had learned.
Hmm.
It's not for you to prepare for that test. But unfortunately, now schools spend a lot of time preparing for the test instead of actually teaching.
Well, and I will say, I would not want to be a teacher in a public school. They have a lot of pressure.
Oh, yeah.
If they're not achieving at a certain level, their school doesn't get certain funding. Their schools are rated now, so there's pressure from the principals that's put on the classroom teacher. Children are coming in with all kinds of issues besides just their learning needs.
Right, right,
So
right.
I'm not trying to bash teachers necessarily. I'm just saying that if a parent has the ability to homeschool their children, that is the very, very, very best educational model that
Right.
you can
Yeah,
create.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and also that helped develop the relationship between
Mhm.
parents and children. Now, one of the things when I was teaching at private Christian school, uh, which one thing kind of uh, made me sad is that I asked my that's a senior class. Ask them if you want have to make a life-changing decision, who do you talk to?
Mhm.
And the whole class, most of them said they're going to talk to their best friend, their peer. Only
Mhm.
one student said she's going to talk to she's going to talk to her mom.
Mhm.
And that to me is pretty sad because those kids growing up in church and good family, but they don't have that relationship with their parents.
Right. Yes. And I think that in some ways we have robbed families
Mhm.
by, this is just a little bit of extra commentary, but with all of the different activities that are available to kids today, they're going all the time. And homeschoolers can fall into the trap just as much as public school kids. So we want them to be in music. We want them to have
Right.
opportunities for drama. We want them to have opportunities for sports. And then in order to be on this particular sports team, you have to be on the travel team if you're really going to go anywhere with it.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, families aren't sitting down at the table together anymore. Everyone's exhausted at the end of the day. They
Yeah.
just turn on the TV for an hour and then everyone plops into beds. There's not that relationship building that I think God really designed for families.
Right. Right.
And that's a caution for homeschoolers just as much as anybody else.
Yeah.
The advantage that homeschool families have is that they do have that time during the day.
Right.
to build those
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah, I know a couple of homeschooling families that the parents have their family business. So the kids are involved in that part, in the family business. That, build up a relationship and also teach the kids how to run a business later on.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's something you can pass on to your children. What a wonderful skill.
Yeah, exactly.
Be an entrepreneur and manage a business. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. So how do the parents kind of get in touch with you if they need some,
Right. So I'm on Facebook, and I have a Facebook page. Uh, well, they can do two things. One way is to get to my website, and that's called simplelifeandhome.com.
simple knife.
Simplelifeandhome.com.
Okay.
Um, and that's probably the best way to reach out at first. They can also send me an email, and I get email at maryjane.bogle@gmail.com.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So either one of those would be great ways to reach out. And yeah, I would love to meet with any parent, either who is thinking about homeschooling, just to help them walk through all of those issues and gain that confidence to take that first step,
Right.
or to meet with moms this time of year, especially, who are feeling completely overwhelmed. They haven't accomplished what they thought they wanted to accomplish by this point in the year. Their children are acting up and not behaving, and it can be just a lot of pressure.
Right.
And I wish someone had pulled me aside and said, you need to relax. It's going to be okay.
Right.
Let's take a look at what you really have done.
Right.
And we can make a plan moving forward to what you still want to do. But even just what you've done so far is probably way more than what you've done.
Right, exactly. And also, it's easy for us to fall into linear thinking. It's like they say, okay, the kids haven't done anything in the past 4 months, therefore they won't do much on the next 4 months. But that's not how things goes.
Right.
They may not learn much on the first 4 months, but if you build up the foundation, then the next 4 months they can fly through pretty quickly. So we have to be mindful of that. Yeah.
My kids, when I was teaching them how to read, they all hit this point where they just didn't want to do the lessons anymore.
Right.
And so we quit.
Yep.
And I gave them little websites that they could go to where they could play games with letters. We had magnets on our fridge. We had a literature-rich environment, and they were still learning sounds of letters and playing with language. It just wasn't in the form of the book that we were going
Right,
through.
exactly. Yeah.
And then about maybe 2 or 3 weeks down the road, they were the ones who came to me and said, I think I want to go back to those lessons again. I'm like, great, here's the book. Let's keep going. And then they each hit a spot where they just, when they decided that they wanted to learn it, it was like we hit warp speed and they
Right.
were
Yeah, exactly.
stopped.
Right through. Yeah.
And that was on their timing. And if I had pushed those lessons, then I would have violated my number one goal for my homeschool, which was to encourage a love of learning.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not fun if
Right.
you have to force it. Now, I get it. There are some times when they just need to learn to obey,
Right.
and everyone needs to do a certain activity, and there's a place for that. But as much as you can adapt to the pace of your children, that's a much better way to go.
Right, exactly, exactly. And also, the way as humans, how we always relate things. So our experience is coupled with our learning. Now, if we had a bad experience, we just don't want to remember.
Right.
What do we have learned?
Right. You can actually sabotage the whole deal
Oh, yeah.
by forcing things that they don't want to do. And it's all about a balance, and surrounding yourself by people who are going to support and encourage you and not compare. I tell moms in some ways they need to put on blinders,
Mhm.
because if you get on social media and you compare your homeschool to someone
No,
else's
no, never.
homeschool,
Yeah.
that's a disaster. I remember I was on this like mom group,
Mhm.
and one mom was talking about how her children were fluent in Farsi. And my first response was, "Ugh, we're not fluent in Farsi." I had to stop and say, wait a minute. A lot of self talk there. You never set out to teach your children Farsi. That wasn't part of your program. Why are you feeling deflated by this? And come to find out, this mom, her children were really struggling with some of their math. Nobody puts that on
No, no,
Facebook.
no. Yeah, everybody put on their
Right.
what? Best face.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, you don't see their struggle. You don't see, yeah.
Right. But everybody struggles. It's normal. And that would be the other message I would give to moms is take a deep breath, and you've got this. You can do this.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, yeah, this we really got to be careful about social media. I mean, social media, there's a right way to use it. There is also a wrong way to use it.
Exactly.
Yeah, has to be mindful of that. Wonderful, great. So now I'd like to switch gear a little bit about I know you're involved with the legislature in some way.
Hmm.
So what's your take now? What's your observation so far about especially those two bills, SB 17 and HB 1134? And the before that, they had the SB, I think 147
Hmm.
that got killed. Uh, and now the HB 1134 is got it. Uh,
Right.
so what's your take on that?
I have a couple of thoughts. I know that there's a lot of pushback from people in education, and some of that is coming from people who have ill designs for the
Mhm.
children. I firmly believe there are people behind the scenes who are pushing an agenda that is very harmful to children. And parents are being stonewalled. We saw that all in the last 2 years,
Right.
where parents were just asking for information and were being treated as if they had no right to any information about what was happening with their children.
Mhm.
We know that we've moved to state standards instead of books and curriculum that can come home. And so parents aren't seeing what their children are learning. And there's a huge rift in trust between parents and teachers.
Mhm.
Um, Now, I will say that there are some things that are in those bills that I probably wouldn't support.
Mhm.
Um, but I know where they're coming from, and that is that parents just want to know what their children are learning,
Right.
and they want to be able to pull their children from lessons that would be, they feel, are harmful to them. Um, that children are being exposed to books that are absolutely harmful to
Oh,
them.
yes. Yeah.
Um, so that's where it's coming from. The problem when it gets to the legislature is that it gets muddy, right?
Right. Right.
Um, and unfortunately, I feel like in some cases that might be intentional. So they add on amendments that the people who were rooting for the bill in the first place now say, well, that is absolutely not what we wanted.
Mhm.
We don't support it. And
Right.
then it dies, and then nothing happens.
Right.
So
Right.
that's where I feel like, unfortunately, we are.
So you
Um,
think that's a tactic they use?
I do.
Okay.
That may
It makes
not be
sense.
fair to all of
Makes-
the legislators out there, but I do. I think that they come through with the bill knowing that, if it starts in the House, knowing that it's just going to die in committee in the Senate. And then they can go back to their constituents and say, well, I voted for it. It passed the House. It just didn't make it in the Senate. Well, that's probably by design.
Wow.
So um, that's where we are.
Yeah. Well, that's why I mean, uh, I now came to the realization that uh, there won't be much done,
Yeah.
substantially done in this year. until we got some new people into the state house.
Right.
Mhm.
And that's proving to be difficult as well. So I don't know if you are aware, but there was a hearing, I think it's going on right now.
Right, today, yeah.
So in the Indiana Constitution, the only requirement to run for state legislature is that you be a United States citizen, that you've lived in the district for a year, and that you're 21 years old.
Right.
Last year, the Republicans actually put an amendment on a voting bill that made additional requirements. And those are either that you voted in 2 primaries for that political party, or that your party chairperson in your county approves you to run.
Mm.
So we have situations, there are 29 challenges to people who are being candidates. And of those, I think 17 are Republicans. And they are being challenged because something has happened to their voting records and they can't prove that they voted in a primary. So when you leave the voting booth, you get a sticker, right? You don't get any type of a certified
Right,
notice
right,
or
yeah.
receipt that you were there. So if the county clerk, something goes wrong with your records, you can't prove.
Right.
And if the county chairperson doesn't want you to run against an incumbent or an established person, they can either not approve your candidacy or challenge your candidacy. And that's keeping some people who would have, I feel, more of a conservative approach to government from actually being there. So we'll see how today goes.
Right, yeah, exactly. Me too. I'm kind of waiting on that. I mean, I experienced how the GOP establishment trying to to prohibit people to run in primary. About this is I think 2020. I was I don't know if you know John Schmidt. He has a show called the Mouthwash.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So he was trying to run in primary, but he couldn't get approval by the Marion GOP. Um, uh, so so he later on he decided to run as an independent, but running as an independent you need I think at 4,000 some what do you call that? You need to have signatures. You need to collect like 4,000 signatures. So I was helping him to collect signatures, and we collected a little over 6,000. But then when they go through, they just like took out more than 2,000, and so he didn't meet that threshold, so he couldn't even run as an independent. So I mean, he was every step the GOP establishment trying to block him.
Well, you have to wonder, when we have a supermajority in our legislature, how we have yet to do any type of legislation that is effectively protecting kids in schools from indoctrination. We can't seem to push that forward. We can't seem to get the protection for girls who want to participate in sports. We can't close this loophole that allows educators and libraries to provide explicit material to children. So it really does become sort of puzzling as to why, if we have a supermajority, we can't make some of these very common sense legislative issues pass that would protect children in our state.
Right. Yeah, and
I don't have an answer to that.
well, I think we're still under emergency, right?
Yes.
And I know John Jacob and
Kurt Nicely.
they're trying to to have the legislatures to overturn that, but that never never get any tractions.
Right.
Yeah, which is sad. I mean, this is think about Republican majority, and we still have the emergency order. I mean, some other states they left that. I mean, even they are not like democratic controlled states, they lift the emergency. So it's
Right.
yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, I think that's all linked to money.
Yeah.
That if we have this in place, then we get certain amounts of
Right.
federal
Right.
funding.
Yeah.
And that goes to another issue that really the government was never meant to be a piggy bank.
No.
Um, but people are relying on the government for all kinds of social issues that the government really was never established to
No.
address.
No. No.
So, but now we're hooked on that, and I think that's where a lot of this comes from.
Right. Yeah. And also, like we have her title? The DI chief DI officer or something like that in our state house.
Hmm.
And she actually got paid more than the governor. So we have that. I mean, it's actually on first floor. She has a big office there.
Hmm.
Yeah, this is, I mean, it's wrong in many levels.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Right.
And then we have the also DEI officers in many school corporations like Como Clay and other schools.
So that's an excellent point. As part of I work part time as a writer, and I have some clients who are in the machinery business,
Mhm.
and they're having a lot of trouble finding young people who are interested in moving into trades.
Right,
And part of the issue there is that we've taken out classes like shop
right,
in schools because we don't have enough money. And yet, if you look at the trends in education in the last 2 decades, the amount of administrative overhead
oh yeah, it's
has
huge.
been raised exponentially. And you have diversity, equity, and inclusion officers, you have all kinds of top heavy administrative staff, very little support for the actual instruction for the
Right,
student.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we're spending a lot more money and we're getting drastically disastrous results.
right, exactly. I mean, if you're really concerned about children and about their academics, you should
Mhm.
hire someone, you know, competent, right? Math teachers or good
Mhm.
language teachers, but not DI officers.
Right.
Yeah, it's just like
Right.
totally wrong. And also the whole social emotional learning, the whole comprehensive sex education, it's just like, I mean, I think to the point, I have to come to the conclusion that they did this on purpose.
Mhm.
They are trying to harm the children.
Mhm.
Not that what we have now, the mass we have now, I don't think is by accident.
Mhm.
It's because someone failed uh, our our education. Is someone actually succeeded um, in making our education so bad.
Mhm.
Yeah, because now they can easily, um, like they said, they wanted to produce social activists,
Mhm.
and now you become fertile ground, right? Because those kids, they don't have a really life skill,
Mhm.
and it's easy to make them believe that they are the victims of the society,
Mhm.
and that they are entitled. I mean, even they are um, have the moral high ground to go out to riot and to destroy. You know,
Right. So we've really lost that crucial ability to do critical thinking
right?
for our children. And I teach a writing class as part of a co op. And I use a book that was published in the 1960s,
Mhm.
but I use it because it is hands down the best book that I have found that teaches kids to come up with a stated opinion and be able to develop pros and cons
Right.
and really think through the issue and work on persuasion. while acknowledging that the opposing side has valid points.
Right.
We've lost that. Children don't know how to think critically.
No, you definitely not. And this is something I'm familiar because my experience growing up in China during the Cultural Revolution, you had to follow certain narratives. And
Mhm.
if you are different from that, then you must be a bad person.
Right.
And that's what the kids are hearing in public school,
Mhm.
right? You have to think in a certain way. If not, you are the racist, you are the white supremacist, you are whatever, right?
Right. And I wish that we could help our children to learn that when someone starts calling you a name,
Mm,
that's the very first sign that they don't have a
right.
reasoned argument.
Yeah, they don't have an argument.
They're resorting to name calling as compared to having a strong position.
Yeah,
So, and again, that's where full circle back to homeschooling,
right.
you can give that to your children and help them to have to learn those critical thinking skills that equips them. And that was one of our goals with our kids, was to give them the tools they needed to be independent learners.
Right, exactly.
And that is one of those very, very important tools, is to start thinking critically, to think about the background of the person who's providing the information. Is there a reason that they're saying things the way that they are? Is there another agenda? What could that be? Um,
Right.
is what they're saying true and valid based on my personal experience or on facts that I've observed in the world? And if not, how do I formulate a response to that that is reasoned? That's super important, and that is not happening.
No, not in our school anymore. I mean, I believe that the public schools are doing more harm than good.
In
Uh,
all too many instances, yes. And I will say, my sister is a teacher. She's a wonderful
mhm.
teacher. It is not every classroom, it is not every school, but it's happening enough that it is definitely a concern. And,
Right,
you really just have to look at their test scores to see that the quality and the rigor of the education has gone down
right,
dramatically. This is not, helping our children.
right. Not yeah. Like last year, the the state average is less than 30%,
Mhm.
less than one third. People actually will up to the grade level.
Right. And that has dropped from like 70 or 80% down to that level in just a very short amount of
Right.
time.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Is we somehow we have a kind of nosedive in the past 10 years.
Right.
Going down, and then they still push social emotional learning because their sell point is that social immersion learning can help kids academic achievement.
Right.
Well,
Well, let's just stop. Only in the government do we reward failure with more money.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, we
Um,
get put more money to do social emotional learning.
Right. That's just not a great idea. And the idea that standards and high academic achievement is somehow racist is
Right. Yeah.
so harmful to kids who are um that's their, to say that we're not going to, do college prep classes anymore because these kids feel like they can't achieve that. No,
No, no,
we'll
no,
come
no.
alongside those
Right.
children and help raise them up to that level and that standard.
Exactly. It is totally wrong. I mean, because they're basically saying meritocracy is white supremacist, is a white.
Right.
That is totally wrong. Because so far, I know many, Chinese Americans and Indian Americans, all the immigrants, we we become successful is because
Mhm.
meritocracy, because we worked hard, right? It's
And
not.
that can happen in the United States better than, or it used to be true that it happened in the United States better than any place else.
Oh, yeah,
That's why we have something called the American dream.
right.
We don't have the French dream. We don't have
No,
the
no,
Russian dream. We
no,
have the American dream.
American dream.
People are lining up to come in. to this country and to take advantage of all of the opportunities that our freedom has afforded us.
Yep,
And that's why I think it's so important to defend that.
exactly.
And people who you're seeing who were never involved politically are getting involved because we don't want that to die.
Right. Yeah, it's like the recall in California of the school board, San Francisco, sorry. And that
Yeah.
was led by Asian Americans.
Hmm.
Actually, most of them are Democrats.
Hmm.
Yeah, because I mean, right now we just have this vocal extreme left people kind of basically are running our education.
Hmm.
And also, you know, way the mainstream media. So, yeah, yeah. But anyway, well, thank you so much. I mean, I really enjoying our conversation, and I hope we can do more in the future.
I would love that. Just anything we can do to help equip parents to
Right.
be better parents and to help educate their children. I'm all in. Let's do it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye.